The multiple conservative efforts in the House and the Senate and even this on the Supreme Court, all in service to an ex-president who has never won the popular vote. They are all a very strong reminder of just how pervasive minority rule actually is in this country and just how far that minority is willing to go to maintain power. As Harvard government professors Daniel Ziblatt and Steven Levitsky write in their new book, Tyranny of the Minority, we have studied violent insurrections and efforts to overturn elections all over the world, from France and Spain to Ukraine and Russia to the Philippines, Peru, and Venezuela. We never imagined we'd see them here, nor did we ever imagine that one of America's two major parties would turn away from democracy in the 21st century. Professors Steven Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt join me here tonight. This is a very, very timely book, guys. Thank you for writing it and joining me on set tonight. Let me just first start with, we began the show talking about sort of the minority working its way through Congress in terms of an agenda to attempt to impeach the president. Now, it's a minority of Republicans, but still it is not a desire shared greatly by the American public, at least from what we know from polling. What do you make of the Republican Party at this point? I know we read that quote, but is it a force of anti-democratic? Is it effectively an anti-democratic force in American society at present?
Well, in our book, we propose a set of criteria for citizens to evaluate whether a political party is democratic or not.
Yeah.
And to be a loyal Democrat, to be committed to democracy, you have to do three things. You have to accept elections, win or lose. You have to not use violence to gain power, to hold on to power. And then most tricky of all, you have to distance yourself, if you're a party or politician, from groups, allies that undertake those first two violations. And so that third criteria is really important because often you'll have mainstream parties or politicians wearing suits and ties looking like normal Democratic politicians, but who turn a blind eye to or justify or excuse these other kinds of violations. And when parties do that, there's a term for that. We call that semi-loyal Democrat.
Yeah.
And in the history of democracies, it's those kinds of political parties that often kill democracies. And so that's why we're worried about today, because we see some of these signs in the United States.
You said in that quote we read that you never thought you'd see the Republican Party effectively, or one of the parties, acting the way that it has. Is there a moment when that realization crystallized for you? Is there a particular thing that really caused you to assess the GOP in that way?
Well, there were several steps. We wrote our first book, How Democracies Die, with the rise of Trump. And we were deeply disturbed early on by the Republican Party leadership. There were very few Trump supporters among the party leadership. And they could have moved much more decisively to block him or separate the party from him had they chosen to do so. But they abdicated their what we call their gatekeeping responsibilities, and supported him, despite the fact that they knew pretty well what was coming. They had an idea. And then during Trump's presidency, I think this happened a little faster than I expected. But watching people like Jeff Flake and Bob Corker, eventually Liz Cheney, go to every single Republican who stood up for the rule of law, who stood up for democracy, who stood up against Trump, saw her or his political career essentially ended. And so most Republicans who wanted to continue their careers decided that no matter whatever they thought privately of Trump, they would become Trumpist in public. And that's when we knew that this party was now a danger to democracy.
And it's not just one party. It's also institutions that have effectively been bastardized, for lack of a better word, and exert far more control than they should over American society. And it's a minority of people making those decisions. I'd love to get your thoughts on the Supreme Court and its current very conservative bent that seems at odds with what Americans actually want.
Yeah, well, we're really unique in the world in that in the United States, it's possible for a minority, somebody who loses an election, to become president.
Yeah.
Through the Electoral College. We're the only country in the world with an Electoral College. And so what that means is that often somebody who wins a popular vote doesn't win control of the presidency. Similar dynamic is at work in the U.S. Senate, where often the popular majority of voters doesn't reflect the majority in the Senate.
Yes.
And this then combines to affect the Supreme Court, because the president nominates Supreme Court justices, the Senate confirms them. And so take 2016, for instance. In 2016, we had a president who didn't win the popular majority, nominating 3 justices, confirmed by a Senate not reflecting a majority of voters. And we now have a Supreme Court that's 6-3 conservative majority, not reflecting anything that the majority of American voters wanted. And so we see this is essentially minority rule. And this is where the title of our book comes from.
And then the question is, okay, so what do we do about it and how do we fix it? I did not know until your book came along that Richard Nixon actually wanted to do away with the Electoral College. I think we have one of the headlines here. I have not abandoned, this is 1969, Richard Nixon, I have not abandoned my personal feeling that the candidate who wins the most popular votes should become president. This was not just, first of all, this is Nixon, as in Nixon, and it was a bipartisan effort. So what happened?
This is a really important point. We don't think of it now. We've grown up in an era, the last half century, where institutional change, constitutional change, is kind of off the table. It's not discussed. It's considered impossible. That actually hasn't always been the case. From the very beginning of this country, our citizens and our leaders have worked to make our political system more democratic. George Washington, the very year that the Constitution was written, wrote a letter to a friend saying that this is an imperfect document that will be up to future generations to improve it. And that's what we've done, whether it's expanding the suffrage or in the early 20th century, directly electing Senate. We used to have an appointed Senate. We have slowly moved and made our system more democratic. We stopped doing it in the late 50s. And one of the last serious efforts was the effort to abolish the Electoral College, which came really close to passing. It was supported by the leaders of both parties. It was supported, as you said, by President Nixon, by the American Bar Association, by the Chamber of Commerce, by the AFL-CIO, by more than 70% of Americans, passed overwhelmingly in the House, had a majority in the Senate, but didn't get the 2/3 to get through.
Ironic.
So we came really close. So there was a time when constitutional reform was considered important, good, feasible. And I think we need to get back to that American tradition of working to make our democracy better.
Well, and I would agree with you. We need to get back to that tradition. But how do you do that when one of the main impediments to that work is a party that is fundamentally anti-democratic as it presently stands?
Yeah, well, it's a challenge. I mean, this is something that we have to embrace. We have to figure out, and there is a path. I think there is a path forward. And so, for instance, I mean, there's some in the last chapter of our book, we proposed 15 different ideas. And so there is a way forward. And one key step is to eliminate the filibuster, or at least weaken the filibuster, because that's a kind of, even though it's a small institution, it's not part of the Constitution, it's just a Senate rule. If we were to eliminate that or to weaken that, then it would be possible, for instance, to get voting rights reforms through. If we had voting rights reforms through, the reforms begin to accumulate, and a kind of sense that reform is actually possible would emerge in our country. And that's what we really think needs to happen to address these bigger challenges like the Electoral College, like term limits for the Supreme Court. And so that's the way forward.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because what you guys propose is fairly radical change. We're talking about constitutional amendments, changing the Electoral College. These institutions that are seen as foundational to democracy are precisely the ones that need to change. And it's actually an argument for Democrats and Republicans alike, because we have a president who's loath to get rid of the filibuster because he's an institutionalist. But what I'm hearing is, in order to be a more representative, fairer democracy, we have to change those institutions. It's not a reaction to it is the only way forward. Look,
Americans may not realize this. We're the only democracy on earth that regularly uses the filibuster. In every other established democracy in the world, regular legislation passes with a majority. It doesn't need 60 votes to pass. That's really undermining our democracy, because Americans look out and they see that majorities support gun control. They see that majorities support voting rights legislation, that majorities may support abortion rights legislation, and none of this stuff can get through. So the will of often large majorities in the United States is being thwarted regularly, systematically, permanently by a partisan minority. That doesn't happen in other democracies.
They update their constitutions, they move forward. It is an ongoing experiment in self-governance. Professor Steven Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, thank you for writing this. It is essential reading in these times. And may I say, it is also hopeful, which is a really unique thing also in these times. Thank you both for your work, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.